All right, everyone, here we go with this. All right, so I want to talk to you guys about two things that is currently going on in Africa. And I think it's important that you are aware of what's going on. These two things happened on the same day. So one was the Italy-Africa Summit that just concluded yesterday. It was a one-day summit that started on the 28th of January. And then the second was the announcement by 3 African countries to leave ECOWAS. These 3 countries were Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. These 3 countries announced in a statement their intention to leave ECOWAS. ECOWAS is the Economic Community of West African States, which was founded in 1975 and has 15 members. So these are the 2 things that have recently occurred. Now, I want to talk to you guys about the impact of that decision by these 3 African countries on Africa, West Africa. And I also want to talk to you guys about the new plan proposed by Giorgia Meloni, Italy's prime minister. So let's start with the first one. Giorgia Meloni recently proposed a plan called the Mattei Plan, named after Enrico Mattei, who was a political administrator in Italy years ago. He was also the person who founded their largest oil company called Eni. Now, what you guys need to know about why she named it the Mattei Plan was because Enrico Mattei was seen to be a friend of Africa. He was heavily respected both in Italy as well as in Africa because he was against Africa's exploitation. He was also known to have even coined the phrase that African countries who were exploited for their oil will need to be paid 75% of the gains of those resources. And so that's why she named it that, because she wants that plan to be seen as Africa-friendly, which is why she called it the Mattei Plan. Now, during the summit that she just had, she invited 25 head of states from Africa, as well as 50 delegates who attended the summit. Now, it's all well and good. And she expressed what the plan was going to be. She even proposed $5.9 billion, which is equivalent to 5.5 billion euros, which covers anything from funding, energy sector funding, education, and health. Now, these 3 areas that she is funding are important, and she chose those areas for a reason. Now, here's why. The energy sector part is a huge problem for Italy. Italy has been losing resources, as many European countries and Western countries. They don't have these natural resources, right? More importantly, they've been losing a lot of the resources as a result of the Ukraine-Russia war. So Italy, like many other European countries, have been getting a lot of their energy supply for their natural gas from Russia, who obviously has cut them all off, or they cut themselves off, I should say, ever since that war broke out. So Russia has been a supplier of gas and energy to a lot of European countries as well as the United States. So based on the heavy sanction that the United States as well as Europe imposed on Russia, they were cut off from all of these resources or these energy sources. So that really affected the economy. Now, of course, U.S., guess what U.S. didn't impose sanction on? You know, with all the sanctions the U.S. imposed on Russia, guess the one part that they did not touch? You guessed it. Uranium, the energy source, because the U.S. needs that. So that's cut the supply off of her. And so she has been needing to find other areas to get resources, energy resources from. So she's been working with Algeria, Libya, Azerbaijan, Egypt. These are the places that she's been getting supply of energy, and she's hoping to increase those supplies from. So she needs Africa, right? She needs Africa. Now, the other part of the reason why she put the plan together is to curb the migrants issue, that she and many European countries as well as the West are facing. She realized the incredible amount of issue this is causing to her country as a result to burdening their economy as well as depleting a lot of their resources. So she, being a smart woman as she is, wants to do something different from what other European countries have been doing with Africa. She also has been mad and upset with France, who has caused a lot of the immigration issues in her country. Because you see, France has been exploiting Africa for years, like many of these other Western countries and European countries, right? They've all been exploiting Africa. But France in particularly has been a direct effect on her because the Francophone countries that France has been exploiting, a lot of those citizens have been making their way to Italy. So basically, when France is benefiting from the exploitation of Africa, she's having to suffer the repercussion of that as a result of these people migrating to her country, which is why she has been against Macron. And you've been seeing that back and forth thing with her and Emmanuel Macron, who doesn't really care, you know, because he's a thief, right? He doesn't care about the exploitation of Africa, right? And so she, in an attempt to do something different from what they've been doing, is proposing a new plan that will not be predatory. And so her new Mateo plan, she is emphasizing that this is not a predatory plan. It's a plan that supposedly will mutually benefit Africa as well as Italy. But nonetheless, she is needing Africa's resources at the same time. So she's still got that agenda going on, but understand why she's doing it. Now, the African countries that she is invited over, here's the problem that she's facing with this. Most of the African countries that she's hoping to convince or covet have already made the alliance with either other Western countries and European countries. A lot of the alliances that I'm talking about are alliances that formed after 1884 or 1885, I should say, when Africa was conquered. But more importantly, they were also sealed in writing when many African countries got their independence. So a lot of the independence that Africa got, or so-called independence that Africa got, were just paper, stuff on paper. It really wasn't a true independence, which is why France has been exploiting its once colonized African region for years. So France has been using the pact for the continuation of colonization to inflict a lot of the Francophone countries. Other British colonized countries like Nigeria, Ghana, and many others have also had the exploitation of these Western areas, Britain, on those soil. So a lot of the terms of the agreement for that so-called independence that Africa got included alliance, Africa's loyalty and alliance with a lot of these once colonizers. So that's one. So her proposal is going up against that. In other words, she is proposing and perhaps asking African countries who have allegiance to a lot of these other Western European countries to break ties and go with her plan. So that's one. Her plan also includes a $5.9 billion budget, right? Which she's hoping to allocate to the energy sector, the educational sector, as well as the agricultural sector and health sector. She's hoping to allocate that. Now, that is a drop in the bucket to what the EU has also proposed. The EU has proposed 160 billion. So she's fighting up against 160 billion with her $5.9 billion budget. So that is a uphill battle that she's also facing. The third uphill battle that she's also facing is that she's a lone ranger on this. In other words, what I mean by lone ranger, she's got her cabinet members in Italy supporting and backing her because they see that as a sensible plan and a sensible approach to moving forward. Let's deal with Africa on a partnership. Let's deal with Africa on a respect level. Let's include Africa in this decision. So that way Africa can begin seeing us as allies, and let's also have mutual plan that benefits Africa's development so we can curb the immigration issue and curb that so Africans are not leaving their countries to come to our country. So that's her goal. Now, a lot of the other European countries don't see her plan because they are these are vultures, right? These are vultures. They are vultures that have been exploiting Africa for years, and they're not ready to let go of that type of exploitative practices against Africa. So she's up against that. So when I mean up against, she's up against France, United States, England, and many of these other countries with her plan. So she's the sole range on this. Now, one of the most interesting thing that occurred during that whole summit was a very testy moment during that summit when the chairman of African Union Commission, Moussa Faki Mahamat, raised an objection with her plan. And basically what he said, I think, made a lot of sense. He said that Africa was not included in this, that Africa should have been consulted before this so-called plan was put forth. In other words, he was raising the type of objection that we have all had for years, which is these European countries only include Africa after the fact. And so what that raised in people like myself and many people is the same old, same old. Here's a lady who is trying to do something different, but she's still going about it the same way they've all dealt with Africa, which is we'll come up with a plan and you just sign it. And so he raised that objection, which I thought was a really smart and very, very righteous objection. Because it is true, she should have consulted the African leaders she invited with this plan before she went up and drafted this whole thing. Now, some others might argue that it's just a proposal. That it's not a final deal. She's proposing something, and that's that. But nonetheless, that was an objection that was raised during the summit. Now, here's what I think she is hoping to get. Here's what I think she's hoping to get. She's hoping to get out of the 25 African countries, at least some African countries to go with her plan. It's going to be an uphill battle. She's not going to. Now, here's why. Because of the reasons I mentioned earlier on, that a lot of these African countries have all cemented their allegiance to a lot of their once colonizers, right? And to break away from that is to suffer some kind of sanctions that most African countries cannot bear. So that's one. Now, there are 3 African countries that I think she was eyeballing. 3 African countries that were once under the thumb of France, which is our arch nemesis. These 3 African countries are Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. These 3 African countries so happen to also have announced recently on Sunday that they want to leave ECOWAS. Now, these are 3 African countries that she's eyeballing, perhaps, okay? Because these three countries had a coup in their countries to basically reject France. You see that? To reject France's presence, because France has been exploiting these areas, the Sahel region, for years. So this was an indictment. The coup was an act of indictment against France. So France has not been on a good look for a while. So these are countries that she was perhaps hoping to gain. Now let's talk about these countries real quickly. Let me tell you why they're breaking away. These 3 countries, during their public announcement, claimed that ECOWAS has not really lived up to its ideals since it was founded in 1975. Now, what are those ideals? ECOWAS was founded on the ideals of helping West African countries band together, helping to increase the operational situation with these countries, provide security, as well as improve the livelihood of African citizens in the West African region. And so these 3 countries are claiming that ECOWAS has lost its way and has not lived up to those ideals based on the intense and inhumane, which is how they coined it, inhumane sanctions that ECOWAS had levied on them ever since these coups occurred. So the junta for these different countries are saying that ECOWAS has lost its way. And though ECOWAS is not supporting the ideals, which one includes supporting the livelihood and the improvement of life for its citizen. And so why impose such a harsh sanction on them when they were toppling a European-backed puppet in their country, which is as a result of what happened with the coup. So that is the argument. So because of that, they're saying that we want to be out of this. We don't want to be part of ECOWAS anymore. Now, here is ECOWAS' position in this. ECOWAS, he's saying that they had to do something, because to not do something when one of its members, performs an act of coup in their country, which is basically toppling a civilian democracy, will be to be seen as encouraging that type of practice, right? And that also sends a dangerous message to all the other members in the country that it's okay for you to topple your government through coup if they don't do anything about it. And so that would have weakened ECOWAS' position, Nigeria being the leader of ECOWAS, if they were seen as not taking any actions such as they did against these countries that had coups in recent time. So that is the position that is. Now, over the last year and couple of years, Nigeria has been working with the junta of these countries that experience coup to try to get them to return power to civilian democracy. Niger says that they will hold on to power for 3 years before they return it. ECOWAS says, yeah, that's not going to work, because to hold on to power for a long time is to prolong your position there, and they fear that power, the military will never return power to civilian rule, and they fear that could be even a worse problem than that. And so there's been this back and forth going on, and because of the heavy sanctions that they impose on them, these three countries have seen it. They're like, we're not getting anywhere with this country. We need to leave, because to them, they are leaving to join alliances somewhere else. Now, who is the somewhere else they're going for? Russia. Ever since this coup occurred over the last year or two, and over the last few years with some of the other countries, Russia has been seen to have a tone and have a presence with these countries that suggests to them that Russia is a better ally for them. Russia has also been reminding a lot of these countries that they've never colonized African countries. So for the reasons why these coups occurred, that sounds like a lot better to a lot of people. To a lot of us, to most of us, when you hear that a country that never intended to colonize us or never even exploited us, you can see how some African people or African countries can see that person as an ally. So to a lot of this junta, Russia is a better ally, right? Not to mention that the mercenary group for Russia, the Wagner group, has been in Mali for all this time, providing the kind of security that these countries are claiming that ECOWAS is not providing for them to solve the terrorist organization that's rising up in this region. And then the Wagner group also has been seen to have talks with Niger as well as Burkina Faso. So Russia has been strategically forming alliance with these ones. Okay. Now, let's put a pin on that for a second. Let's go back to Giorgia Meloni. So these three, I mentioned earlier on that these three countries are perhaps her best bet because these are free agents. These three countries are free agents. They're not under any Western, pressure. They don't have a Western puppet ruling their country anymore. They toppled the ones that were in bed with either West or Europe. And so for all intents and purposes, these countries are free agents, right? So they can do whatever they want. And so they don't have to answer to anyone. Now, she would like to have these three countries support her. However, she is not going to get it. Why? Because these three countries are looking at Russia, and she is against Russia due to the Ukraine-Russia war. See, when Russia and Ukraine decided to go to war, a lot of these European countries had to form alliances. They didn't realize that some of these alliance and this partnership or decision they're making to back one over the other was going to hurt them later on. So she was one that joined alliances with Ukraine. So she supports Ukraine against Russia. And now it's coming back to bite her in the ass because she's possibly needing some African countries who are looking to be part of Russia, so she ain't going to get that. You see what's going on. So her plan could very well be DOA, because a lot of the countries like that came for that summit are either not going to go with her plan because they risk retaliation with the current partnership they have with either the West or some European countries, or neither. The other ones are just going to go with Russia, right? So while I think that she has had a tone in the past that has been more friendlier, that seemed to be proposing something that these other ones are not proposing. And nonetheless, she's got a tall order to fulfill, because she needs these African countries on her side for the survival of her country as well as the growth of her country. Whether she gets any African country to go with her, or whether she gets the key African countries that she needs because she needs those resources to go with her, that's a different situation. Okay, so now let's talk about us. Let's talk about us now in Africa and West Africa, and how the decision by these 3 African countries, how that affects us as Africa. I will tell you that the decision for Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger to now break away from ECOWAS is going to weaken West Africa and ECOWAS. It is not a good thing. ECOWAS, my suggestion with ECOWAS would be that ECOWAS will need to work fervently to ensure that these 3 countries don't break away. Because we are strong, united. We are much stronger together. And the 15 African countries that make up ECOWAS are much stronger when they band together. I would much prefer that Nigeria lowers or reduce the sanctions that is imposed on these countries. Much better to just lower its sanctions. I would rather that Nigeria does that than having to have these countries break away and go to Russia. Because what that does, it weakens the West African region. And it weakens the West African region to where others and other Europeans can now come in as vultures like they've always done to rip its resources much more than it is right now. Now, I say that as a person who is not in a position of power. It's not as easy as that. The reason why it's not as easy as that is the same reason why ECOWAS could not just have sat back and not do anything when these coups were occurring. ECOWAS could not just have said, you know what, these are our brothers and sisters that are being oppressed, which they are. You know, this coup occurred. Let's just let it be. Because again, that will be seen as sign of weakness, not to mention that would have encouraged copycats. And these countries that make up ECOWAS could very well have been the next ones, because that would have sent the wrong message. Now, to reduce the sanctions, right, that also could send equally this type of message that if you cause a coup and you hold out long enough and threaten to break out, you could have your sanctions reduced. That could also weaken the ECOWAS position and encourage copycats. So that is a problem. So now, something's got to give. Something has got to give. And I think that where ECOWAS finds itself, and Nigeria being the head of ECOWAS, Nigeria will have to concede to some of these things. Because these junta have all clearly taken a position, and clearly stated that we're not with any European country exploiting our countries anymore. We're not for it. So that is clear. They've made that really clear, right? And they've also now band together, right, to even form the Sahel Alliance in the region. They formed an alliance group in the Sahel. Now, that was created, and that is seen as a spite against ECOWAS, because if you're having a country that having a country run by junta, now create an organization called the Sahel Organization or Sahel Alliance. What happens? What message does that send to other countries who might be like, you know what, I want to join that? So that is seen as a threat to ECOWAS. So there's that going on. Now, while all this is going on, this is dividing Africa. This is dividing Africa because, A house divided cannot stand. And so ECOWAS has a decision to make. And I think the best path for ECOWAS right now, to be able to stand united and stand stronger, to be able to fight any foreign opposition, will be to ensure that these three countries do not break away. Because these are our brothers and sisters. Nigerians and Nigerians, you can't tell the difference. And I was not in agreement with, this one of the sanctions against Niger, which was to kill their energy supply and to keep them in darkness. I was not with that. So I think that's one that Nigeria could just give them back their power, because Nigeria supplies Niger with electricity. So Nigeria will need, something's going to have to give. Because if nothing gives, then they will break away and go join Russia. And that's not good for Africa or the western part of Africa. Now, they have a year before this decision is finalized, because according to the treaty that every member signed when they joined ECOWAS, if any member decides to leave ECOWAS, it first has to be submitted in writing, and they have a year from the moment it's submitted before it's finally dissolved. I'm hoping that within that year, from now till then, that they reach some kind of a logical agreement that makes sense for both the countries who are looking to succeed from that and also the other ECOWAS members. But more importantly, I'm hoping that this keeps the members in ECOWAS, because they are stronger united. Now, that being said, here's why I say that they're stronger united, because in this area, with these crazies out here, Europe and the West, there's a looming war that is undoubtedly going to happen between the United States and China. And this war is a war that I think is going to usher in World War III. Now, here's why I said it, and I'm going to close real quickly. China, United States have never been friends, and they're not going to be friends. Now, you add Russia to that. So there's this looming animosity that's been brewing for years. It's basically every administration has been kicking the can down the road. I think there is a World War III that is inevitably going to happen. Now, the question is, which administration is going to usher that in? Now, here's what I mean by that. With the whole Ukraine-Russia war, obviously, Russia and the United States have been enemies forever. They've never been friends. That war drove Russia to the arms of China. So they formed and cemented an alliance. China has been working with Africa for years, and China has been in Africa for a long time, gaining Africa's trust with the funding of projects going on in Africa. Russia now wants a piece of that. So Russia is looking to gain some alliance from Africa, hence, the coups that have been going on. So that's going on. Why? Because Russia sees that she going up against the United States is not going to work. She's not going to be able to defeat the United States. The United States is probably not going to be able to defeat Russia if they went one-on-one with each other. Basically, what's going to happen is that these two countries are just going to cause damages to each other, but there's not going to be a winner in that. The same thing with with China. China and US go to war. There's not going to be a winner with that. These two countries are huge economy. They have huge military might. They're just going to inflict damages with each other. So it's going to be a stalemate. Now, with alliances, with Russia aligned with China, and China having some African countries on its side, and Russia having some African countries on the side, now that's a different game changer. Now, the problem with that is that a lot of these African countries have already sworn allegiance to many of the Western countries who are ensuring that Africa doesn't break away, because they understand that this might happen. Now, Russia ain't going to fight for Africa. China ain't going to fight for Africa. And China ain't going to fight for Russia. The only one war that China will get into against the United States is a war against the US over Taiwan, because that serves China's interest. Taiwan, for years, China has been looking to annex Taiwan back to China. United States backed Taiwan's decision to break away from China years ago. Back then, it was a military strategy for the United States because it's easy for U.S. to plant a base in Taiwan in the event that they want to attack China. That was the reason. Today, it's a different reason why U.S. needs to ensure that Taiwan doesn't annex with China. Why? Chips. Taiwan is the largest manufacturer of chips. Chips today is the one thing that helps to power AI and a lot of the new technology that's going on right now. So these two countries have a power grab. China and the United States are racing to be the first to control AI. They're racing to be the first to land on the moon. They're racing. So these two countries have an economic agenda, right? Because the United States is the most powerful country on earth. China is second. China wants to take the place of the United States. So China ain't going to just go into a silly war against the United States just for the heck of it, which is why China is not going to back or fight anyone else's war. You get that? So Russia ain't going to get China to fight his war for her. They're not going to do it. But when it comes to Taiwan, which I think it's a war waiting to happen, I think for the same reason we saw Russia go to war with Ukraine, is the same reason we're going to see China go to war over Taiwan. Because for years, Russia was telling the United States, yay, you better not try to annex and put Ukraine into NATO. They've been sounding this for years. United States basically just brushed it down like, get out of here. You know? And they've told the United States, if you do this, there's going to be a war. They sent out memos. Russia did. The United States being the superpower and the bully that she is, she's like, whatever. And caused the war that's just occurred in Ukraine. Now, Ukraine is suffering such a devastation. Ukraine is almost almost laid down, laid to waste. Russia has been decimating Ukraine. I think what we're going to see is the same thing with China, because China is watching to see how this thing plays out. And China is saying, oh, wow, see, Russia, with all the sanctions against it, has been able to weather this whole thing. And so China is probably calculating the potential loss to its economy because the United States is the biggest trading partner for China. So with China, the United States is the money stream for China. So China don't want to mess that up. However, China probably understands that there's a chance it's going to have to go to war against the United States over Taiwan because they need Taiwan to be annexed into China for the reasons I've just mentioned. The chips. Because they're all racing to be the dominance and superpower and they want to control AI. US ain't going to just stand by and let China take Taiwan. So there's a problem there. So that's going to probably cause. So that's probably going to happen. Now, Russia understands that China is going to have to go to this war because Russia now is reminding China perhaps of the similarities and where they both relate with each other. Because the same way Russia went after Ukraine because Ukraine was trying to get put into NATO, it is the same way China is going to have to go against Taiwan for the same reason. So Russia and China share similarity in that part. So undoubtedly, these two are going to be friends for a long time. Guess who else is probably going to jump in the mix? North Korea. Because North Korea really sure hates the United States. So North Korea is probably looking for a reason to just go to war. Now, guess who's friends with North Korea? China and Russia. And North Korea has a missile capability. You get what's going on here. So Africa is the neutral party with all of this, which is why there's a scramble for Africa, which is why everyone is going, because Africa is the one that's like neutral in all of this. Why these other people are less hating each other? Africa is like, leave us out of this. But these countries are like, you can't just stay away from this because you got to take a position. And so a lot of these countries that were once colonized in Africa, a lot of these colonizers are trying to, cash in their IOUs by going to these African countries and say, hey, you remember the terms of the, pact for the continuation of colonization? Or you remember the term of the agreement for your independence? Okay. So that's going on. So there's all this conundrum going on, which is why I think with ECOWAS will really need to ensure that it stands and keeps Mali, Burkina Faso, as well as Niger within its partnership. because that is a chance they have to fight against any foreigner. Because if we stand together, we have a chance of defeating any foreign country who doesn't have our interest at hand. Now, if we start breaking away and having this, then we only weaken our position as an African continent, as well as a region in the West or East, or even in the South part of Africa. So these are things that you need to watch out for. And I think that we are going to see in the coming months what decisions are going to be made, and we're going to see strong alliances form. But I think that that will be the solution for ECOWAS. They're not going to like what they have to give up, but they're going to have to give up something. Because I think that that will only make sense for the survival of West Africa, as well as for the survival of ECOWAS, as well as the Sahel, as well as our brothers and sisters who are being under the oppression of these European countries. That to me makes more sense. But anyway, thank you all for watching. Please leave me a comment, like this video, share this video, subscribe to this channel, and I will see you all next time.
Det finns ingen annan där som kan stå här by my side, oh why. Sätter du rör på det får mig att dö för det baby.